Okay. Hey, let's do it. What should we talk about today? I know. Let's talk about what I call the shame campaign. Okay, so what's the shame campaign? It's exactly what it sounds like. All right, let's talk about that. A couple of days ago, I made a video. I can't remember the exact title, but it was something like, Are we to blame for the loss of our freedoms? I made it just a couple of days ago. And my basic conclusion was, yeah, to some degree we are. Now, again, that's not in any way to diminish the um, the actions of those who have perpetrated great wickedness against us. No. I'm not doing that at all. I'm not absolving them of the responsibility of what they have done against us at all. What I am saying is we have made ourselves easy targets because we, as a people, collectively have refused to believe how bad things are. We have listened to the counsel of very evil people who have told us to do this, and many people did this, right? Too many people followed the path of least resistance and listened to these so-called authority figures, once again, who told them all of these things to do, and people did it, right? Very few people actually wanted to truly educate themselves as to what's going on in the world. So in many ways, people are not spiritually prepared, right? They're not spiritually prepared to defend themselves against the spiritual onslaught, which is, absolutely happening right now. So in that regard, we make ourselves easy targets. That was my point. Okay. Now, in an ideal world where you had enough people who are brave and who adhere to the truth, that is not the world we live in. But in an ideal world where you had enough people who were brave and adhere to the truth and the rule of law, these evil people would be, held accountable. And I mean that in a lawful sense, but these people would have already been arrested and there would have been legal proceedings. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I mean, I don't trust our legal system, but I also don't trust the American people. I say that as a proud American. I always have to drive that point home because so many people have simplistic interpretations of what people say. And so they hear me I'm very critical of the American people as a whole. And I say this as an American, because I talk a lot about what we as Americans either do or fail to do, because I realize that there is a small minority of very courageous, active people. But like I said, it's a very small minority. The majority of Americans are uneducated. And I'm not even talking about the amount of schooling they have. I'm talking about uneducated in terms of understanding how the world truly works and how the American government works, against us as opposed to for us. And the average American, in terms of worrying about their own freedom or working to secure their own freedom, is very lazy. Now, I understand people are busy. I got it. But still, many people are just, can't be bothered to worry about these things. And then we wonder how we get in these situations, right? Okay. That said, I'm kind of talking to the core of people who at least are awake and who are trying to get engaged to figure out what we can do to improve our situation. Now, ideally, we'd have a bunch of people who are arrested and, they're facing charges for all the criminal actions, to include treason, that have been perpetrated against us, Anyway, but what can we do short of that? Or even in conjunction with that, maybe for people who aren't guilty of crimes per se, but they definitely should be held accountable in some regard. How do we do that? Well, I think we employ tactics like the shame campaign. Like I said, it is exactly what it sounds like. So what do? We demonstrate our scorn with individuals who completely deserve it, and who are those individuals? Well, there are government leaders that are either guilty of crimes or at the very least they're guilty of, negligence or cowardice or whatever, right? And we let them know that. That could be, of course, it could be, the president. I mean, of course, let's be honest. And by that, I mean two presidents. I mean both of them. The current one or the previous one. In my mind, they both deserve our scorn. Also, there are a lot of leaders in Congress that have been completely negligent. Some of them are probably guilty of crimes, and they should be prosecuted. But I'm talking about the other 500 or whatever. I don't know how many are guilty of crimes. Maybe it's a lot. But, between the House and Congress, you got over 500 people, right? So, I mean, I can only think of, I've said this before, when it comes just to the COVID response, between the House and the Senate together, so in both houses of Congress, I would say there are maybe a handful of people that I would give a passing grade to when it comes to their COVID response. And by a passing grade, I mean like a C- or a D. There's not a single person in the House or in Congress that I would give a grade higher than a C- for their COVID response. Not a single one. Ron Johnson, at least held, out of a senator from Wisconsin, held a couple panel discussions, tried to get DOD to answer some tough questions. DOD completely blew him off. He didn't really do much to follow up. I don't think he's done much at all. And yet I think he's done more than any other senator or congressman. He's probably the one who has done the most and has spoken out the most. I'd give him a C-. I think he should have done infinitely more. He has referred to the mandate from DOD as a crime. I believe he has. Congressman Thomas Massey from Kentucky has also referred to it as a crime. Other than those two, now I might be wrong. Other than those two, I don't know anyone else who has specifically called the mandate a crime. If I'm wrong on that, let me know in the comments. I'm not saying who's called him out. I'm not saying who said that the mandate was dumb or that it was, a strategic blunder. There are very, very few. There are a few people who have called out DOD for that. That's true. But has anyone referred to it as criminal or unlawful or illegal? The only two that I can think of are Senator Ron Johnson and Congressman Thomas Massey. If I'm wrong on that, please let me know in the comments. But my point is that if there are a handful that I would give a passing grade to, you got 530 other members of either the House or the Senate that have just been completely on their asses. Completely. So, I mean, they need to be shamed. We should be calling them out incessantly. Now, if there are a couple that are on our side, then okay, so be it, but they need to prove that they're on our side. And by on our side, I mean like on the side of truth, on the side of the Constitution, on the side of the country. Because here's what people need to wake up to. Our country is being subverted by people who are guilty of treason, okay? And until you wake up and you're willing to say that out loud, then you don't understand what's going on. If you're not willing to say what is going on, then you are not being helpful. You're mincing your words. You're worried about who you might offend. You're worried about, trying to be overly precise with your language so that nobody misinterprets because you're afraid to actually say what's going on. If that's you, then you're a coward at a time when our country does not need more cowards. The sad lesson that we have learned is that, we like to think that we're big and bad and tough as Americans. What we have learned over the last couple of years is that in the collective, that is not true. That is not true. The American spirit of risk-taking, of being courageous, of fighting for what is right, the rule of law, that is gone. That is gone. At least when you talk about in general terms. Now, are there some people who still believe in those principles? Yes, they're very, very few and far between. So when I look at our congressmen and our senators, not everybody, but virtually everybody, is completely unhelpful. And I do not care about the excuses of, the bureaucracy. I got it. I understand. I understand that DC politics is full of red tape, and yeah, listen, I understand all that. And when I say I understand it, I'm not saying that I understand just how bureaucratic the system is. I'm saying I acknowledge that I probably don't have an accurate appreciation for how bad that is. That's what I mean when I say I understand it. But I don't care. If you think you represent the people because you serve in either the House or the Senate, if you think you represent the people or the state, depending on whether you're in the House or the Senate, respectively, you need to be speaking up. You need to be speaking out. If you're being quiet because you're afraid about the next election, you're afraid about alienating your constituents, most of whom are not awake to the realities of what's going on anyway, then you are not serving your country, and you're in violation of your oath to the Constitution. It is what it is. And I'll tell you, I'll give you some examples. So in the summer of 2021, I had taken command of the battalion in the 101st. And so this is probably July. So I took command of my battalion in June of 2021. The mandate comes out in late August of 2021. So about July, I told my mom, this is how I engaged my mom in this fight. I said, hey, I'm from North Carolina. Write out to the two senators from North Carolina, which were Tom Tillis and Richard Burr. It's complete losers, and basically did nothing. They were absolutely no help. Tom Tillis wrote a letter back and said, vaccines are super helpful. He encourages everyone to get vaccinated. And he said that, oh, by the way, there is no mandate in the military, which was technically true, but was incredibly elusive because he made this comment maybe a month before the mandate went into effect, and the writing was on the wall. I mean, I knew it was very clear that the mandate was going to come very shortly. And of course it did within a month, right? There was talk everywhere about it. And the reason I kind of enlisted the help from my mom in reaching out to these two just completely cowardly senators was kind of in this last ditch effort to try and get ahead of this. And they were no help. Now fast forward, I'm already relieved of command. Now it's probably the summer of 2022, and but I'm still in the Army. So I call my congressional representative for my home district in North Carolina, and that would have been Patrick McHenry, not to be confused with the patriot from the founding period, Patrick Henry. Two completely different dudes, separated by about 2 centuries in time. So Patrick McHenry, my congressional representative, so I call his office, and I'm talking to some staffer, and you never know who you're talking to. Like, am I talking to some? Yeah, I mean, am I talking to some 28-year-old staffer? Not that there's anything wrong with, a young individual on one of these guys' staff, but you don't know who you're talking to, So I'm talking to some guy, and to his credit, he lets me just basically chew in his ear for like 15 minutes, and I was like, hey, listen, my name's Brad Miller. I'm from your home district in North Carolina. I'm in the 101st Airborne Division in the United States Army. I'm a lieutenant colonel. I've already been relieved in my battalion command position. I'm not going to take this injection. Now I'm probably going to end up having to leave the Army. What are you doing to fix this injustice? And are you aware that this is unlawful? Because by this time in 2022, like, I completely know that this whole thing is unlawful because of the whole, bait and switch between the Comirnaty and the, the BioNTech emergency use authorization product, right? So what does he do? He tells me, hey, politics, nothing we can do. And I got it. I understand, politically, maybe there's not a lot that they could do, but they're also not willing to expend any political capital, even in speaking out, hey, they're going to tell me, oh, hey, Democrats control the House, not a lot we can do, et cetera, et cetera. Patrick McHenry, of course, is a Republican. I understand that. I also think that is a complete cop-out. Hiding behind political bureaucracies is not how we're going to win this war. And we are already in a war. I'm not asking people to operate outside the law. But what I'm saying is that, when you're in a position of authority, because you're a senator or you're a congressman or you're a state governor or whatever, or even if you're a mayor of a small town or you're in a state assembly, whatever it is, school board, whatever it is, if you are afraid to speak out, then you are part of the problem. So Senator Tom Tillis, you are part of the problem. You are a complete coward. I'll tell you what, I don't know if you've woken up since that letter that you sent my mom 2 years ago. I don't know if you've woken up since then, but when you sent my mom an email in July of 2021 and said, oh yeah, I support the vaccines. I'm vaccinated. Everyone should get vaccinated. And oh, by the way, the Department of Defense doesn't have a mandate in place anyway. You knew as well as I did that that mandate was coming. And yet you were elusive in your response to the mother of a lieutenant colonel who was facing being relieved of battalion command and would be relieved of battalion command about 3 months later. Now, Senator Richard Burr, I don't even know if he responded. So I'm not going to say that he did or did not respond to my mom. But he certainly didn't give a positive response. I mean, yeah, certainly not. So also zero help. So then, the next summer, a year later, the summer in 2022, when I speak out to Representative Patrick McHenry's office and I speak to this staffer, to his credit, and I'll give credit where credit is due, his staffer at least allowed me to chew on his ear pretty good for 15 minutes. I was fairly direct, like firm and direct. And this staffer, he took it, to his credit. Now, I have no idea what message was transmitted to the principal. So did this staffer go to Congressman McHenry and say, hey, by the way, this afternoon, I took a phone call from Lieutenant Colonel Brad Miller. He's from our district, but he's stationed out at Fort Campbell, Kentucky right now. He's in the Army. He's already been relieved of battalion command. Now he's about to resign and leave the Army altogether. I don't even know. I don't know if that message was transmitted. But what I will tell you is Patrick McHenry certainly didn't do anything to help. Now, his staffer may have said, hey, sorry that this has happened to you. Nothing we can do. Okay, well, hey, I appreciate you being polite. And I appreciate you explaining to me the political realities within which you operate. However, don't think for a second that I think that your boss, Congressman McHenry, is courageous, or that he cares about truth, or that he ultimately cares about what happens to his country. Because I don't. I don't think that. I think these people are cowards. I think the overwhelming majority of congressmen are cowards. I think the overwhelming majority of senators are cowards. I think the overwhelming majority of commanders and senior leaders within our Department of Defense are cowards. And until that changes, until we get rid of all of these individuals, nothing will change unless things get worse. But they're not going to get better unless we make them get better. They're not going to get better unless we make them get better. So right now, there are a lot of people who are attempting to get a congressional hearing. And if we get a congressional hearing, I think that would be great. I think that would be fantastic. But I will tell you, these congressmen, with very, very few exceptions, I don't trust any of them. You know? Actually, I don't trust any of them as much as I feel that I should trust them. Some of them I trust to a fair degree, you know, maybe a little bit more than a fair degree. Like, and again, I'm talking about a handful. But let me reiterate, I don't trust a single one as much as I think that I should trust them. You know, some of them I trust, you know, some. The most of them, the overwhelming majority, like I said, you know, 530 of them, give or take, I don't trust at all, you know, at all. And some of them I think are probably engaged in treason, and many of them are engaged in crimes. So out these people, you know, the same thing with these military leaders. I'll tell you what. So there are a lot of uncourageous lieutenant colonels and colonels out there, or if you want to talk about it in the Navy, you know, commanders and captains. It's kind of my peer group, the people kind of just above my peer group, that did not do the right thing when this COVID op was perpetrated against us because they were worried about their careers. What these people should be worried about is obtaining employment when their days in the military are done. And let me just go along with me in a thought experiment, okay? So let's think for a second. So if I were an employer and I owned a company of, you know, whatever type, and so there's, you know, a position that's open, you know, I receive a resume, so-and-so is going to come in for an interview, okay? According to the resume, I see that this person is a retired officer from the Army, you know, or the Navy. Just go with me, okay? At that level, kind of a retired, let's say a retired lieutenant colonel. All right, so-and-so comes in, you know, we have a short dialogue as part of our interview. Hey, I've seen your resume. I see that you had a full military career. Tell me a little bit about that, you know? And because the general rule is when you go see an employer who is receptive to veterans, right? Typically it's because that person believes that, well, if you're a veteran, you've demonstrated leadership, you have values, you have a work ethic, you have a wide variety of experiences. You've probably traveled, you know, quite a bit around the world. You've demonstrated courage, but you're also a person who can be trusted, you know, and you're a person that can be depended on and can be relied on and will get things done, right? You're a person who is loyal to the organization, but also understands doing the right thing. You're patriotic. So there are all of these things that one assumes when potentially they may hire a veteran, right? Okay, so in this case, and again, this is just a thought experiment, but this individual comes in, I'm interviewing this individual, and oh, okay, so you just recently retired from let's just say the Army. Okay, so you recently retired from the Army. I'm reading your resume. These are some of the positions that you held throughout your career in the Army. Well, what if I were to talk to that person and say, hey, what what did you do during the COVID mandates? What did what did you do? Oh, well, I was a battalion commander when the mandates went into effect, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then I might say, well, when you were in battalion command during those mandates, you chose to go along with the mandate. Yeah. I believe that it was the right thing to do, military readiness, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Well, what happened with service members who were part of your battalion who did not choose to go along with this mandate? Oh, well, we separated them from the service. Okay. Now this individual is telling me a couple of things, right? Now listen, I'm not going to agree with their decision to personally have gotten vaccinated, and if they got vaccinated, then I probably would have to question their worldview. That's very, very true. Does that mean I might not necessarily hire them for this position? Just the fact that they're not very awake as to what's going on in the world? Maybe, maybe not. But let's put that aside. Okay, their personal decision to get vaccinated, let's just set that aside. What I'd be far more interested in as a disqualifying criterion for this job is that this person followed and passed down unlawful orders, which means in my mind, this person who I'm looking at as a potential candidate to fill a position in my company, instead of exhibiting all of these traits, which we typically assume that veterans are going to come with, this person doesn't have those traits. In fact, he has demonstrated emphatically that he doesn't have those traits. Courage, absolutely not. A willingness to stand up for what's right or to recognize what's right, absolutely not. So, I guess potentially I could look at this person and say, well, you know what? I know you're very loyal to the organizations that you work for because you're willing to, in essence, break the law for your organization. So if the organization that I am an employer within is some sort of crime syndicate or a mafia family, maybe you're the person I want to hire. But if this is a more above board organization that I'm an employer in, and this person, this veteran, this retired lieutenant colonel, let's say, has demonstrated to me that, that they're actually not loyal to the Constitution. They actually put the organization ahead of the country, don't understand the law, are not willing to challenge unlawful orders, are too susceptible to groupthink, can't think for themselves, can't challenge assumptions, can't demonstrate strategic thinking ability, and is a coward. Why would I hire this individual? Why would I hire this individual? Now again, this is just a thought experiment. I'm not being vindictive. I'm not being vindictive because I lost my command in my career. Okay. Now, people ask me this all the time. Am I angry and or frustrated about what happened with my career? Yes, of course I am. But I'm also completely at peace. Now, how can both of those exist at the same time? I don't think what happened to me is right, but it is what it is, and I've moved on. I don't plan to go back to the Army anytime. I'd have to cut my hair, which has been growing for like 10 months. I've been out of the Army for almost a year, but I think my last haircut was it was like 10 months ago. Hey, I got some haters out there. But I know my hair is not very manageable. That's true. It needs to grow a little bit longer to be less unmanageable. But I do have some haters out there, and it's like, hey, don't be hating that I have thick hair like this and I'm in my almost mid 40s. Let's just be honest. Like, where's the line between early 40s and mid 40s? I don't know, but I'm probably there. So anyway, so don't be hating. Don't be hating just because I have thick hair. I didn't know it was this curly until I let it grow out. That is true. I had no idea it was this curly. Anyway, the point is, I'd have to cut my hair to go back into the Army. And I'm being facetious, but the reality is I don't see myself going back into the Army. In that regard, I've moved on. But I'm not in this thought experiment that I'm engaged in right now about a potential employer coming to me that I could bring on to work for my company or organization. I'm not being vindictive when I say, well, why would I hire this individual? That's not me being personally vindictive. That's me being honest and saying, this individual has demonstrated very clearly that they lack integrity. They have some character flaws, you know. Now, if this individual were to come to me and say, okay, so same scenario, but in this case, individual comes to me and says, hey, listen, let me tell you why I left the Army. I left the Army. So I retired as a lieutenant colonel, but I was actually probably going to get promoted to colonel. And I left. I was a true believer in the narrative. And then I pushed it on my subordinates. I made a lot of people get the shots. I just didn't know. And then I woke up that this whole thing was unlawful and this whole thing was not what we've been told all along. And you know what? I decided I got to leave the Army and I resigned. And that's why I'm looking for a job. Now, if this potential employee came to me with that kind of demeanor and told me that, okay, maybe that's a different conversation. Okay, maybe that's a different conversation. But in the first case, where this person just, went along with it and has demonstrated no willingness to stand up against what happened, then why would I hire that person? Like, sorry, but you don't have integrity. I can't bring you into my company. You're not a leader. I can't bring you into my company. You think you're a leader. Your resume tells me that you think you're a leader. You're not a leader. Okay? You are an embarrassment to the uniform. You're an embarrassment to the flag that was on that uniform. And I'm not going to hire you. Go somewhere else. So anyway, that's just a thought experiment. I'm not looking to hire anybody right now. I'm not in any position to hire anybody. So that is a complete thought experiment. But it goes back to my overall sense here that we have to shame these people, particularly elected representatives, because they do care what their constituents think. Now, the sad truth is the majority of their constituents, the American public, are still very, very, very confused. Are the majority of Americans ever going to wake up? I don't know. I mean, many of them, I don't know. I would like to think that they will. Will they wake up in time before the next op is perpetrated against us? I don't know. So anyway, just kind of in conclusion here, if your senators and your congressmen, if you've reached out to them, I'm kind of speaking to people in the military, right? But not just those individuals. If you reached out to them and they weren't any help, put them on blast, let everyone know that they did not help you. Denounce them for the cowardice that they have displayed, the un-American attitudes that they have displayed. We have to realize that we're at war. We are at war. Americans have died. Okay. And sadly, more Americans are probably going to die. I mean, the shots are poisonous. There are people right now that are probably injured from the shots that, unless we can figure out how to detox them or counteract the effects of the shots, I don't know exactly, what's possible, but whatever, unless that is figured out and that information is widespread, there are individuals who took the shots, particularly those who took 3 or 4 shots, that are injured, and some of them may not be here in another year, 2, 5, or 10. That's not me wishing that upon anybody. I wish that we could get information to those individuals to help them clear that out, in as much as that may even be possible. I'm just saying that there are effects that are probably still going to play themselves out for some of these individuals who've been injured with these shots. My point is that a lot of people have died because of the COVID op, but I don't think we've seen the full death toll. And it's not just the COVID op. I know I keep saying that because it's what has just happened, and another phase may be starting to happen again. But we don't even know what just happened here in Hawaii recently, right? And we're not going to get clear answers. And you may think like, oh, that's crazy to blame the government for that. I mean, is it crazy to blame the government for that? I mean, come on. I'm not saying what it was or was not. I'm just saying we're probably not going to get any answers. And I'm saying it's not crazy to assume that it's possible that the government would have a hand in harming its own citizens. No, that's not far-fetched. If you think it's far-fetched, you don't understand how the American government works. You don't understand anything about history. Like, you do not understand anything about history. America is not a nation under God. Now, we could say that it once was. When did that change? I don't know. Was it gradual? I'm not here to tell you. We could quibble about that. But I will tell you that America is not a nation under God right now. That is not true. That is not true. I'm an American. I'm a Christian. I do not believe that America is currently a Christian nation. The government is completely evil. That doesn't mean that every single person in the government is evil. It means the government is controlled by very evil people. I completely believe that that's true. And we, the people, regardless of how many of us might be Christians, we've allowed that. We have allowed that. To our utter shame. And that stands as an indictment against us as a people, because we have allowed that. And, you can fight me on that, and you can say, no. Okay. I'm not saying that maybe you personally, whoever you might be, that you allowed it personally. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that we, as an American people, over the last how many generations, we have allowed ourselves to get to this point. So was America founded as a nation under God? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about 2023, the country that we're in right now, that is completely ruled by evil people. So shame these people, shame them, call them out by name. Many of them are criminals anyway. And the others that aren't, they're complete cowards. And they do not deserve to hold the positions that they hold. So if we're ever going to recover some of the principles upon which the nation was actually founded, it's going to take a lot of work. And a lot of Americans are going to have to, pull their heads out of their asses. There's just no other way to state it. So anyway, thanks for letting me ramble on. And I'll see you next time.